So in John chapter 10, Jesus refers to an Old Testament passage where he calls different beings gods. But that's kind of a problem for us and a problem for the Jews who believe in one true God. So what does Jesus mean in this text? We're going to be talking about that and more in the next 10 minutes. Today's episode is brought to you by Logos. Learn more about the world's best Bible study software at logos.com/themove.
Welcome back to The Move, where we are vibing with the book 10 minutes at a time.
The next 10 minutes, we're looking at John chapter 10, verses 22 to 42.
As always, the question is, have you read it? If you haven't, it's in the comments section below. We're going to put 10 minutes on the clock, and we are going to start in 3, 2, 1.
So there is a lot that can be said. There's a lot that could be said
about
this chunk of the text. But there's this one part of John chapter 10 that is, at least to me, very confusing initially on. Jesus refers to a text in the Old Testament where he says, I said y'all are gods. And it's this idea like, hey, Jesus claims to be God. Then they want to stone him. And he's like, well, hold on. Why are you so upset when I claim to be one with the Father when I've told you already, or when the text has already told you that there's provision for this?
Yeah.
So what does that all mean? How do you make sense of this?
And what do you mean by provision for this? Provision for what exactly?
There is precedent in the Old Testament where this concept of gods with like a lowercase g shows up. Jesus is basically saying, I'm referring to this. I'm referring to this one specific chapter. You guys have no right to be upset with me because of this one chapter. And it's important that you know this chapter because it makes sense of everything else that's going on.
And they have no right to be upset with him in his claims of being from God.
Correct.
Because there is precedent that there are these beings that are from God that could be present in the world.
Absolutely.
This is what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
This is what Jesus is saying. And let me tell you now what Psalms 82 is saying.
Okay.
In order to make sense of all this, you actually got to go through Psalms 82. This psalm seems to take place in like this council, this group of divine beings meeting together. Psalms chapter 82 verse 1 says, God has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment.
So there are other gods.
Yes. Now this would fly in the face of monotheism and especially everything that Judaism teaches about it. But there's a distinction between like this capital G gods and this like lowercase g gods. You were trying to help me explain this. How would you make sense of this?
Yeah, so the idea is that the term here, Elohim, right, is that there is a multiplicity of Elohim. Elohim being a plural for beings that belong to the spiritual realm. So if you're from earth, you're a human. But if you belong to the spiritual realm, you're an Elohim. Now somebody would say, well, isn't God Elohim? Well, God is an Elohim. He is an Elohim, but he is Yahweh. And there is only one Elohim that is Yahweh. But there are other Elohims that belong to the realm of Elohims.
So if you think of like an organization that has a board, this board is the thing that makes a lot of the calls for how the organization, the business, the nonprofit runs. But there is only, like there's a group of board members, but there is only one chairman of the board that stands apart, but also part of the board.
But he's also a board member.
Correct.
Right? So he's like, you're a board member, but you are the chairman of said board, right?
So this idea is that God, the Father, Yahweh, is a member of the Elohim Council. He's a member of the Divine Council, but he is also separate from it in some very, very, very meaningful way.
Very meaningful. Now, remember that it's not only members of the council that are called Elohim. Elohim is just, again, a term that corresponds to the realm you belong to. So if you belong to the realm that is spiritual, not terrestrial, you are, in fact, Elohim.
So it's within this context that this chapter comes to. Verse 2, how long will you judge unjustly? And the question is, who is God, Yahweh, speaking to within context? Well, he's holding a divine council, so he's talking to all the other lowercase g gods there. How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? How long will you give justice to the weak, or in his advice, give justice to the weak and the fatherless, maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute, rescue the weak and the needy, deliver them from the hand of the wicked.
Verse 3, who's he speaking to?
He's still speaking to this divine council.
Okay, so he's telling them, hey, give justice to the weak and to the fatherless. Maintain the right. So he's giving them an imperative to do. Okay.
And here's the reason why. They don't have knowledge. They don't have understanding. They walk about in darkness, and all the foundations of the earth are shaken. To these people, God the Father says, "You are gods, sons of the Most High, all of you. Nevertheless, like men, you will die and fall like any prince."
So they are belonging to the realm of spiritual beings, and seemingly they are given a conditional immortality that exists in relationship to God, right?
Correct.
But now he's saying, because you have not given justice to the weak and the fatherless, because you have not maintained the right of the afflicted and the destitute, you have forfeited your right to life. So although you are gods, sons of the Most High, belonging to the realm of Elohim, nevertheless, like men, you will die and fall.
An example of what a council like this would look like is seen in Job chapter 1, right? You see God assembling all these sons of God together, and then Satan shows up as a representative of earth. Where'd you come from? I came from earth, roaming to and fro. There's this like kind of mastery and dominion kind of language that's present in that council. What's really interesting is that in verse 8 of Psalms 82, God the Father, Yahweh, gives an answer to what is the solution to all this wickedness and this injustice that's taking place under the leadership of these lowercase g gods.
Now, real quick, why is it that these lowercase g gods have leadership?
Because rightfully so, they've won that. And what we see that is this is the story of the Old Testament, that God was trying to preserve his seed. And then we see, for example, like at the flood, we even see in the story of Job, like, Satan's like, dude, I've won. I have this whole thing. Like, there's no one here. Like, there's no one who will bow the knee to you. And God's like, no, I got a little bit.
You see my servant Job, right?
And so we get this idea that God's dominion is holding on by a thread, if not defeated. And so God has to enter in and overcome this wickedness of the world. And of course, we're going to see this highlighting here in verse 8 that he does so in the person of Jesus, right?
Yeah.
There's this language right here, "Arise, O God, judge the earth, for you shall inherit all nations." God speaks to another God right here and says that you are the one that judges, you're the one that inherits all the nations.
Yeah, and right here you see sort of latent, nascent, the idea that of Trinity, right? Where God is actually speaking to this figure who will arise and inherit all the nations, right? So that the whole world will be drawn to him when he lifted up and or arises, right? Haggai 2:7, the desire of all nations, right?
And this is what was beautiful about Jesus quoting this in this moment. He says, "I and my Father are one." They start to get upset, like, how dare you equate yourself with the Father? And they want to stone him. And Jesus is like, why are you so upset? Like, this was prophesied. This was foretold in Psalms 82 that something would happen. And what's beautiful about this is all through like the previous chapters, what is the way that Jesus proves that he has the right to make this claim? He says, when I am lifted up. Like, he's making this call to the idea that he's not only going to die, but he's going to be resurrected. And this is seated in Psalms 82.
What's interesting about the usage of that word arise in the Septuagint, it's the same word, belongs to the same family that's used for resurrection, right? From anastasis.
And so the very proof that Jesus has the right to make this claim of equality with the Father, where he could say, I and the Father are one, is literally seated in Psalms 82, the very fact that he would be resurrected.
And this is the trajectory of Jesus's argument all the way back from John chapter 8, that I am the light of the world. I am the one that all reality is actually oriented around. And the way I will justify this claim or give evidence of the validity of this claim is that I will resurrect.
I will arise.
That I will arise, right? And all the nations will be drawn unto me, right? I will be the God of not only the Israelite, but I will also be the God of the Gentile as I pour out my spirit to the nations, precisely because I now have rulership over the whole of all the nations, right? Very interesting. Very interesting. If you're interested in that, do some study on divine counsel. You can Google the divine counsel, and there's a lot of interesting things there.
Check it out.
All right. We'll see you in the next 10.
Hey movers, I recently got to travel to the Logos headquarters and ended up recording several tutorials on how you and I can get more from our Bible study using Logos. To see the entire playlist of videos, visit logos.com/themove and get 10% off any Logos 8 product you want. logos.com/themove.